Good evening and welcome to Fascinating Illustrator Tutorials with your host, John Simson. And this evening I'm going to be talking you through a beginner's guide to gradients. So I don't know if any of you have used gradients in Illustrator before. So far I think that you've just been using block colours. So you've just, what you've done so far is you've made a shape, so here's a rectangle and it's just had a solid colour in it. What we're going to be doing today is we're going to be looking at adding gradients to your colours, something like this, so where you've got a range of colours in one shape, but we're going to do something like this, but that looks a lot better than this is the idea. So why use gradients? Well, they're really useful. You do need to be careful with them. You do need to be subtle. If you're really heavy-handed with them, they look rubbish. If I make myself another rectangle here, and I get my gradient tool, and I get a really ridiculous gradient between, I'm going to go between yellow and like bright red, pink, and then I'm going to drag that there. Don't worry, you don't need to follow this, but my point is that a gradient like this, it doesn't look great, does it? And it's hard to see what kind of use it would have. But if we're subtle with our gradients, what we can do is we can create shapes, illustrations, what have you, that have loads more depth to them. Absolutely loads more depth. So this is an example of a template you will be using to design a Mr. Potato Head character. You know all about this task. And what I've done here is I've used gradients to give a sense of depth to each part. So it looks effectively kind of 3D-ish. So that's what we're going to be focused on doing today. Okay, so what's the best way to work with gradients? Well, the first thing I want you to do, you should be following me from now on. The first thing I want you to do is pick a colour. We're going to go with this nice blue that's just up there on our swatches. And we're just going to select the shape tool, and we're just going to draw a rectangle or square like that. Okay, that's dead straightforward. And then I'm going to duplicate this. Easiest way to duplicate is to hold down Alt, click and drag over, and then I'm going to use another cheeky little trick, Control D, which will duplicate your last action. So that's a really good way of building up patterns really quickly, for example. So what I've got is just 4 identical blue squares, and these squares are actually going to be the basis for our gradient. In fact, what we're now going to do is we're going to select each square. So I'm going to start with this square on the left hand side, double click on my color picker tool down here, and I'm going to pick out a darkish blue, so you can see the original color here and where we're going, and that's quite a lot darker. And I'm going to click OK. I'm going to leave that second one just as is, and then I'm going to come in over here on the third one, and I'm going to pick quite a lighter colour. You know, quite subtle differences. We don't want really heavy, obvious differences in colour. And I'm going to pick this last one, and that's going to be our lightest blue, somewhere around here. So what I've got is a continuum, or whatever you call it, of blues, from a dark, quite rich blue to a very light sky blue, and that is going to be what we're going to base our gradient on. Now, I can hear you asking, what is the easiest way then to turn these colours into a gradient? Well, if we come over here, we have got our swatches window, which we can just click on and pop up. And this useful little button here is for a new colour group. So if I click on the new colour group button, can you guess what's going to happen? It's going to make us a little swatch out of all these colours. So I'm going to call this blue, and just click OK, and there we go. Down here we have got a range of different blues which we can then make a gradient from. Okay, so now I want you to draw one more rectangle. This fella here, this is what we're actually going to apply a gradient to. You don't have to move it, I like symmetry. I get nervous when there's no symmetry. Okay, so how are we going to do that? Well, over here we've got our gradient tool, and it will default to the last gradient you use. So you remember when I set up this hideous pink and yellow fellow earlier? Well, it's remembered that. So whatever the last gradient you used, it will have. For you, it will probably just be a black to white gradient. For me, it's pink to yellow, but it don't matter. We're going to click on that, and our selected square is going to become filled with that gradient. But we don't want pink and yellow, so how can we change this? Well, we're going to go up to our swatches here, just at the top, and we're going to start clicking and dragging our colours across. And in the meantime, we can also be deleting the colours we don't want. So if you just click and drag these, so this yellow, for example, if I just click and drag that off, it disappears. Get rid of that one too. However, a gradient has got to be made of at least 2 colours. So it won't let you, if I try and drag this off and bin that, look, that bin there is blanked out, I can't delete it anymore. I'm going to drag my 4 colours, my 4 shades of blue, over onto here, and I'm going to drag that purple one off altogether. So now we're only working with shades of blue. I'm now going to bring my darkest shade of blue over to one side, and I'm going to have my lightest shades of blue over on the other. So I've gone from dark to light, and what you can see is that basically these 4 shades are appearing as a gradient in this square below. Now what I want you to do is I want you to have a little play around with these gradient sliders. So if I bring this in from that left hand side, we're going to get more of the dark colour. So we can actually position where the colours happen just by clicking and dragging. By the way, the gradient slider is a bit weird, and it sometimes duplicates colours when you don't want it to. So if it does do that, which it just did for me, just click and drag it off like that. Okay, so I can move the position of my sliders, and that will affect over here the position of each colour. And at the top, I've got this slider here, which actually controls the gradient point between the 2. So if I bring this really close together, and that slider's right over there, you can see that that makes that really ugly, kind of really obvious split on the gradient. So generally we want to position our sliders somewhere in the middle, and we want to make sure that we've got enough space for that gradient to be smooth and to look decent. Hopefully you're looking at that and you're thinking that does look like it's got a bit of depth to it. Obviously these are just solid colours, and solid colours will always look flat. Flat isn't necessarily a bad thing. Flat can be a really awesome thing. In fact, flat design is really fashionable at the moment, but sometimes we're going to want to work with gradients and get that richer sense of depth. And the other thing I want to show you is that we can also change the angle of the gradient up here. So at the moment it's just set to basically straight vertical down, just straight down here. But if I say offset that to 90 degrees, it will rotate the gradient, so it's now horizontal. Or we can set it to 30, and then we've got a nice kind of diagonal gradient coming in. So that angle there, and obviously we can manually enter that if we want to whatever we want. So I just use the keypad there rather than just picking these presets off that menu like 30 or whatever. I'm changing that to 35, and that's my gradient. Looks pretty nice. Made sure I kept it subtle, and I've just gone from darker to lighter shades, all within that blue parameter. I like it. Hope you do too. Right, so the next step, if you can bear with me one sec, I must drink some water. Get thirsty work. These tutorials are thirsty work. It's better. Isn't water magnificent? Okay, I'm going to delete all of this stuff because we don't need it. It was just to show you. And the last thing I want to show you before we move on to playing around with this actually on Mr. Potato Head himself is I'm going to select an ellipse here from my shapes, and we're going to play around with circular, or to use the correct term, radial gradients. So I've selected my ellipse tool. I just clicked and held there and selected the ellipse tool. I'm going to hold shift. You always hold shift down if you want to maintain the aspect ratio, or to put it in simple terms, make sure it's a perfect circle. If I don't hold down shift, I could end up with some kind of awfully squidgy circle, and I really don't want that. So I'm going to hold down shift and let go. That's already at the last gradient we selected, but I don't want to use blue. I feel like we should do something new, so I'm going to go for a red, a rich red plain circle here. Okay, so how can we use gradients on a more circular shape? Well, same principle. Oh, it would be nice actually, we'll work with circles. So I'm just going to duplicate this circle here. So I drew the circle, clicked and selected it, hold down Alt, let go of Alt, let go of your mouse, and you've duplicated it, and Control D to duplicate that again. I reckon 3 will be enough for us. I'm just going to go with 3 circles, 3 shades of colour. So same principle. I'm going to start over here by clicking on this circle. I'm going to select my colour picker here and go for a darker shade of red, somewhere around there I reckon. And then on this final circle on the right hand side, I'm going to go for a nice lighter shade of red somewhere around there. And those 3 reds are going to be the basis for the gradient of this circle. So I'm going to click and drag over this to select all 3 of them, and then I'm going to get my swatches window open on the right hand side here, and I'm going to click on this little new colour group button, clickety click, and we will call that colour group red. And I've now got myself a little colour group of 3 reds. Marvellous. Exactly the same process as before. So I'm going to make sure I have my circle selected. I'm going to come over to my gradient tool, which for some reason or other has reset itself to black and white, but that's fine. I'm going to click there, and that's going to apply the gradient to that circle. But I don't want it black and white, so I'm going to come over here on my swatch here. I'm going to pull over my 3 shades of red. So click and drag, and I'm going to get rid of the white and get rid of the black. And so I've now got 3 shades of red on my circle, and just like before, whenever I was showing you it, it's going from left to right. But we don't want that. We want to create a circle that has something of a 3-dimensional depth, and the way we're going to do that is we are going to click on linear up here, because this is the type of gradient. At the moment it's linear, that means it's a line. If we select radial, that means it'll be a radius. If you remember from your maths GCSE, which I'm sure you all adored, radiuses have got something to do with circles. So we're going to click on radial, and there we have a radial gradient. The colour on the left hand side will be the colour in the middle of your circle, and the colour on the right hand side will be the outer one, and we can just drag these points around just to get a nice smooth gradient. I think I'm fairly happy with that, and you can see now that that really gives us a sort of three-dimensional aspect to this circle. So again, all about gradients and depth, and getting that sense of depth, making it look a little bit 3D by using gradients. So I'm going to come over to my Mr. Potato Head here, and if this was Mr. Comic Relief Potato Head, I'd have a nose sorted for him. But it isn't Mr. Comic Relief Potato Head, so I'm just going to delete that. Okay, so you should have your Mr. Potato Head template. You probably already got it open, but just in case you don't, go on to Moodle, go to My Name. We are now on week 4, and download that template, open it with Illustrator. And you'll be looking at something like this, except you won't have, God bless you, poor people, these "here's one I made earlier" style things. I got myself some shades and and a beard. I hate men with beards. I think beards look dreadful, but I thought maybe Mr. Potato Head would benefit from a beard. So here we have ready-made. You're going to be developing your own accessories for your Mr. Potato Head character based on whichever icon you picked out the hat. So whichever one it is you're looking at, you're going to be developing different accessories for them. Things that look a little like this, which you can drag and stick on Mr. Potato Head's face. So what we're going to look at is how we can apply gradients to those and make them look like they've got a bit of depth. Let's start with our sunglasses. I'm going to stick my sunglasses here on the middle of Mr. Potato Head's face. I'm just going to zoom in a little bit so we can see better what's going on. Useful little shortcut which you probably already know, but just in case you don't, if you hold down space and click on your document, you can pull around it so you don't have to use these fiddly little fellas who are very annoying. Okay, so here is Mr. Potato Head wearing sunglasses, looking pretty cool, pretty fly, but I reckon these sunglasses could look a lot better with a gradient. So once again, I'm going to get my gradient tool open here. Do you know what? I'm not going to bother with making like circles or squares and a colour palette, and a colour swatch, sorry, because I've already got quite a lot of blacks to whites on this swatch already, and I reckon they're going to be everything that we need. So I'm going to click on my gradient tool straight away, and I am going to click here to activate that gradient, and that's what we got. Don't like that at all. I think that looks pretty crap, mainly because it's far too white, and I could sort of just bring a lot more black into it, but no, we're gonna try and do better than that. We're not going to be lazy. So I am going to bring over, I reckon I'm going to need this very dark grey but not quite black, and I reckon I'm also going to want a grey about here, and then something pretty light. Should we go for this 40% grey? That's probably going to be enough. Now, what I've got to do is work out where to position these, and there's always an element of trial and error to it, to get this to look, like a pair of shades, give it that bit of depth. Tell you what, I reckon rotating it to a 30-degree angle will help, because then it looks a little bit more like light hitting them. And what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to duplicate my I'm going to duplicate my colours quite a few times. So if I hold down Alt and drag, then I'm duplicating each shade. So I'm going to duplicate the pattern, so it's basically going dark, middle, light, dark, middle, light. Do you reckon that'll work? Still seems pretty heavy at the moment, doesn't it? Maybe we don't need those white light ones, so I'll get rid of them. Yeah, that's starting to look a bit better, isn't it? Okay, so this is what I'm going to go for, I reckon. I am going to go for... I've just used 2 tones, and that's all I've got. But the thing that is a bit different is that I have positioned them multiple times across here to get that sense of depth, and there we go. There are my sunglasses. Trial and error is really important to gradients. The more you use them, the more you'll get a sense of what might work and what might not, but trial and error is an important part of it. So do take the time to play around with these sliders. Delete colours, you might not need them in the end though, and you just use 2 different shades and see what you can end up with. What can I do with my beard here? So I'm going to bring this beard, this handsome beard, onto Mr. Potato Head's face. Oh yeah, he's looking like a real man now, isn't he? I like it. It's a good look, Mr. Potato Head. Maybe I was lying before when I said I didn't like beards. This is actually a pretty good look. So, I am going to play around with exactly the same principle here for Mr. Potato Head, except we don't want his beard to be made up of black and white like that. That's no good to us, or black and grey I should say. I want Mr. Potato Head's beard to be made of some nice brownish colours, I reckon. We'll experiment with those. So I'll click and drag these over here and delete the greys that I don't need, and I'll try and get some nice rich tones and a nice bit of depth to my manly Mr. Potato Head. He is the man. Right, I don't think left to right like this is going to work, so I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees. Oh no, it doesn't look like I am. I'm going to rotate it 180 degrees. Nope. Yes, I am going to rotate it 90 degrees. Does this guy even know what he's doing? Probably not. I'm going to have the shadow at the bottom and the lighter colour over here. So what I've got is a kind of dark to light shadow that gives it a bit of depth. In fact, what I might even do, if I double click on this gradient slider here, is I might try and lighten this colour up a little bit. I feel like a lighter colour is going to be good, so I've gone for actually a lighter colour here, and I reckon that's about right for me. I'm liking how that looks. One final trick that I could try, and this is something you'll find quite useful, is if I close my little gradient window here, over here we have graphic styles, so I've got to make sure I've got that selected. Click on graphic styles here, and we don't want graphic styles, we want appearance. Here we can add effects, much like in Photoshop we can add effects. You've got some of the same ones, drop shadows and inner glows and that kind of thing, and a lot of them are fairly useless in Illustrator, but there is one that is pretty useful, and that is if you click on this little FX button, go to stylize and pick in an inner glow, so that will add a glow to the inside of a shape. Now the thing that's slightly confusing and misleading at first is that the word glow makes you think like it has to be lighter than the colours. It has to be a light thing, glows light, but it doesn't. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to your inner glow will almost certainly be defaulted to screen mode, and you'll have a light colour somewhere around here. Well, I'm going to actually pick out a dark colour for my inner glow. I'm going to make sure I have preview selected here, and I'm going to put the blend mode on normal. And at the moment, there we can see a little bit of a darker shadow that gives everything that bit of depth. Opacity, yours will probably be at 70, I would have thought, and your blur will probably be quite a lot smaller than that, like 1.5 or something. So if you look at this at 70 and 1.5, it looks pretty rubbish. But if I increase the size of that blur, I'm going up to about 4mm, and I'm going to bring the opacity down to about 50, then what that does is it adds a little bit of shadow effectively to the outline of my beard. If you're not happy with it, you can always come back to it here. You have a menu here of your appearance, of any effects that you're using. I think that's maybe a little bit heavy-handed, so I'm going to actually look at my blend modes and see if any of those look better. So no, screen is lightening it. Overlay is probably too subtle. Colour dodge looks rubbish. Colour burn looks rubbish. Difference looks rubbish. What about hue? Nah. I'll tell you what, I'm probably going to go for overlay after all, and just bring up the opacity of this layer. We'll try it at 70 after all. Yeah, I like that. I'm happy with that. So that again is adding a little bit of depth to our beard, so it just feels a little bit more textured and a little bit more three-dimensional. And there we go. Don't know who this dude with the shades is, but he is clearly a cool customer. So that's how we use gradients to create depth, how we can use effects like inner glow to create depth and make your design feel less flat and a little bit more three-dimensional. Hope you enjoyed that fascinating tutorial. I apologise for the bit where I went waffly in the middle. I'm quite hungry actually, and believe it or not, it is 7:26 and I haven't had dinner. I best go and cook, hadn't I? I will see you this week and give you another wonderful instalment of tutorials very soon.